Okay, hello. So week 2. Okay, so the no's won it by like a landslide on the discussion. I think what I might do is post an optional discussion and we'll talk about current events. So look for that sometime this week, but the no's, they won it by a mile. I think only 2 of you voted yes, and one was sort of a hesitant yes. So this week we're reading chapter 2, and remember to do the reading. It's going to inform your topic, and it's going to also help you with the midterm and the final exam. So this week we're reading chapter 2, The Great War, and it was called The Great War because at the time they thought we would never see another conflict like that. Our own President Wilson here in the United States did not want to get involved. Initially, he was very isolationist, and then there were acts of aggression and the hints of an invasion from our southern border. That's why I tell you to watch the news. Everything, when you're studying history, you need to be watching the news, reputable news, preferably from 2 different sources on opposite sides of the political aisle, so to speak, because you see these things repeating. Do we hear about a porous southern border? Not so much right now, but especially during the Biden administration, that was a hot topic of conversation. And somewhat now with these ICE raids. So in World War II, the Germans were trying to get an invasion going through and from Mexico. And so that, as well as some bombing of our passenger ships, really prompted President Wilson to get involved in the war. But the war was terrible and it was destructive. So then at the end of World War I, they have the Treaty of Versailles. And of course, France and England, they are ticked off at the Germans. They want reparations. They want to be repaid for the damage that they incurred. But then what happens right behind that? The Great Depression. And the Great Depression hit worldwide. So nobody's repaying anybody, which then, if somebody owes you money, it's a point of contention. Well, imagine that magnified to a national level. So it is thought the end of World War I really set the stage for World War II. Also, it's kind of interesting. It seems, the kickoff event for World War I, that maybe could have been isolated, but that there were all these fragile alliances throughout Western and Eastern Europe that really just broke apart, and war just ravaged all of it. So that's what you're looking at this week. Then your assignment. You are finding 5 primary sources and 5 secondary sources based on your project that you picked in week 1, your project topic. You're going to list them in Turabian style as best you can. I'm not going to be mean or cruel or harsh about grading the citation. I just want you to get used to it. In this world where you can answer almost any question on the internet, we sometimes forget to cite our sources. Those sources are important, especially in the study of history. So it's more to get you thinking, okay, this is someone else's work. I need to give them credit for this work. It's what I will grade harshly is the distinction between primary and secondary. Primary sources are the raw materials of history. They are the artifacts that are uncovered. They are pictures, they're diaries, they're journal entries, they're newspaper articles from the time. So, for example, if you were looking at, say, the Vietnam War, if you had a newspaper article that's published within the time frame of the Vietnam War, that's going to be considered a primary source. If you have something published now, looking back at the Vietnam War, that's going to be a secondary source. Timing matters. So primary sources are the raw materials of history. They're the Supreme Court cases that deal with your topic. They are laws, like legislation, that deal with your topic. They are, again, photos, diaries, letters, newspaper articles from the day, magazine articles from the day, anything. So when I have you list the source and then write at least one sentence for each source that indicates its relevance to your topic. That's where, if you use the word background or context and you think you have a primary source, you don't. Background and context comes from secondary sources. So that's kind of an easy way. I linked a publication from the University of Minnesota that explains primary, secondary, and tertiary sources. Those are like your encyclopedias, things like that. Those are secondary sources that if you use them, they would go in your secondary sources. I really do not want to see Wikipedia. That's not scholarly. We want to be scholarly with this. So 5 primary sources, 5 secondary sources. If you have a source and you're like, I don't know what this is, you can text me, you can message me, and we'll work through that together. So please keep that in mind. I welcome texting. It's convenient for me. I also welcome the class messengers feature, but I'm not as quick with that. So just bear that in mind. It'll take me a little bit to respond to class messages, but texting is pretty immediate. Okay, that's this week. Reach out with questions. And also, I'll be grading this week your topic proposals. Keep an eye out for that. If there's less than full points, look at the feedback, because there's probably a note in there. Maybe you need to pick a different topic. Maybe something's amiss. So pay attention to the feedback. I will get through all of those this week so you can be off and running for the rest of the class. All right, have a great week.